Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, very good. Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Rama Hare Hare. Haribol. How are you doing? Getting through. Yeah, that's what we're all doing. All right. Okay, Haribol. Haven't seen you in so long. I'd like to sing a song. Hari Hari Bipale. Hari Hari Bipale, I read in Jamuna Devi's book that she asked Srila Prabhupada one time what was his favorite bhajan, and he said, Hari Hari Bipale. So I've been singing this for many years now, and it's definitely a favorite. Mm-hmm. You have it? You know, I haven't even been wearing masks the whole time. But I don't go anywhere. Hari Hari. A little higher, a little bit higher. Could you? Yeah. Oh, there you are. Hari Hari Vipale Janama Goainu Vipale Janama Goainu. Again. Hari Hari Vipale Janama Goainu. Manusha Janama Paya Radha Krishna Nabhajiya. Janiya Shunya Bisha Kainu Shunya Bisha Kainu Golokera Premadana Hari Nama Sankirtana. Premadana Harinama Sankirtana. Rati Rati na jani lokene ai. Rati na jani lokene Sansara Bishanale Dibanishti Yajale Sansara Bishanale Dibanishti Yajale Juraite no koinu Sachi Suta Oilotei Brajendranan Dhanajai Sachi Suta Oilotei Chilo Hariname Yudharilo Hina Hina Jata Chilo Hariname Yudharilo Shakti Jagai Madai Tara Shakti Jagai Prabhu Nanda Sutta Rishabhanta Dutta Aha Prabhu Nanda Sutta Rishabhanta Dutta Koruna Koro Ei Baro Koro ei baro Narutomo dasakoi Natelio langapai Natalia Rangapai Umadina ke ache amaro Umadina ke ache amaro Hadi Hadi Vipale Janama Govainu Haribol. So, we are very lucky today, honored to have with us Sauri Prabhu, who was Srila Prabhupada's last servant, I believe. Yes. You what?
He called me his oil smearing secretary.
Oil smearing, yeah. He said Prabhupada referred to him as his oil smearing secretary. He used to give Prabhupada's massage and everything. So I don't want to, his health is not the greatest right now. So I want to, I'll end here and let Sauri share some nectar with you all. Okay? Haribol.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I don't know what time do we go till?
As long as you like. Prashadams usually serve at 1:30.
Okay. Oh, so we got a lot of time.
You got some time.
Okay. We'll keep this as a questions and answers event. I think that will be the easiest. If anybody has any questions, we'll start from there. No? Saha. I wouldn't want to say this is Agnidev Prrabhu. He was the third devotee that I ever met. I'd gone to Sydney in January, February of 1972. Actually, yeah, just at the end of January. And I had gone there with the intention of trying to find the people that I had seen in this magazine that I bought on the street. And so I had this Back to Godhead, which I had no idea what it was about, who the people were that were in it. On the front cover there was the picture of the Rasa Leela. That was all completely foreign. When I saw that, one of my friends, we were trying to figure out what was, this picture and all these blue people and, flowers falling from the sky. I was thinking, what's going on with this? And we couldn't figure it out. But I kept the magazine. For 6 months we went to Northwest Australia. I was working in the mines there on the surface. And at the end of December, I think 1971, I decided that I had to go and find these people that were in the magazine. So the one address that was in Sydney, I was right as far on the opposite side of the country as you could be. So I got down to Sydney eventually, and for about 3 or 4 days, I was wandering around the streets, hoping that I would bump into the Sekatan party. And finally, after 4 days, I did. I heard the cartels, and so I followed my ears, and this gentleman came up to me with a shaved head and saffron dhoti, and sold me another magazine and told me where the temple was. So that was Agnidev Rrabhu. I think, I think you'd only been in the temple 2 weeks or something yourself.
No, it was some months.
2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I always remember that. The first devotee that I met was by Barbie. Yes, you know, from Utah. Her and Chiru. Yeah. She was the one who sold me my first magazine. And who was the other one? Oh, and then the second devotee that I met was Upananda Prabhu. I met him. He's what's his name now? He took sannyas a few years ago. Forget now. Anyway, I always remember he's number 3. So, does anybody have any questions or comments about Srila Prabhupada?
What can you give us some occasions that you saw Prabhupada at his happiest?
At his happiest? It's hard to say. I mean, that's a really subjective question. Prabhupada was...
From your experience,
Well, I mean, Prabhupada was always happiest when he saw the preaching going on. And he had this capacity that no matter how many people joined and how many temples were opened, you know, he didn't rest on his laurels. He had a vision of Krishna consciousness in every town and village. So he was, you know, eager for that. Anything that, you know, helped him fulfill that. And so whilst he was very, very happy to see the book distribution increase, new temples open, he was especially happy to see his leaders taking up the responsibilities for preaching so that he could sit and do his translation work in the night. But, you know, he didn't rest on his laurels. If you did something nice, he would appreciate, and then he would say, oh, so what's the next one? He had a plan which encompassed the whole world. That was very, I mean, Prabhupada was a very broad thinking person. There was a story that OBL Kapoor, Prabhupada's godbrother, he told me, this was just after Prabhupada's disappearance, actual disappearance. I went to see Dr. Kapoor, and he told me that in the 1930s, that was when he'd gotten to know Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada had the Prayag pharmacy, and at that time, Abhiyal Kapoor, Dr. Kapoor, he was a fairly young student, 19 years old, and he was going to attend the programs in the Allahabad audience. So Prabhupada used to go there practically every evening because he was very expert playing mridanga, so he was always in the kirtans. And Abhiyal Kapoor got to know him and became friends. And one time he said, I went to the temple and Prabhupada was there. He said, I had some kind of a, not flu, but some, difficulty. So Prabhupada told him, I have a tonic I'll give you for that, which will cure that. So Dr. Kapoor replied, oh, thank you very much. I accept your offer of the tonic, but I want the one that you have. I want the one that you're taking. So Prabhupada said, oh, what is that? He said, the one that gives you love of Godhead. So Prabhupada laughed. He said, I don't have that tonic. He said, but I have the formula. And one day I'm going to preach this all around the world. Now, this was in early 1930s. So Dr. Kapoor told me, he said, I didn't think much of it when he said it. But now, he said, after 30, 40 years, he said, now I can understand. He was serious. He meant it. He wasn't just, talk. So Prabhupada always had it in his mind that he would go out and he would preach all over the world. And in 1975, I think he was in Hawaii. He was somewhere in America. he got some contact with his other god brother, Bon Maharaj. So Bon Maharaj, of course, we all know he was the first real official attempt to establish Krishna consciousness all over the world. They'd gone to London, but after 3 or 4 years, they'd been called back. And Dr. Kapoor, Bon Maharaj was not very successful at what he was doing. So then 1960s come. Actually, Bon Maharaj was still, he established for himself some kind of scholarly contacts. So even in the 40s and the 50s, he was going occasionally to the West to meet with these scholars. But actually, he wasn't interested in making devotees. He was very happy that he had got some scholars and had been recognized as a scholar himself. So Srila Prabhupada, of course, he had no interest in that kind of, name tags. He was into preaching and, making people actually into devotees. So what was I going to say?
75?
So, all right, 75. So anyway, it happened that Prabhupada was in the West and Bon Maharaj was also in the West at the same time. So he wrote him a letter and invited him to come to Rath Yatra like that. And Bon Maharaj apparently had complimented Srila Prabhupada on what he was doing in spreading Krishna consciousness to thousands and thousands of Westerners, which he said he couldn't do. And he said that verse from Lord Chaitanya, Prativite Chejito Nagaradi Gram Savatra Prachahoy Be Moranam. He said, you're the one that's come forward and has actually fulfilled that prediction. So it was very complimentary, which was nice. Later on, Prabhupada had the devotees not stop him from coming to the temple, but he heard some things. Bon Maharaj had made some comments, and he said, well, if he's going to be like that, then he can come to the temple, but he's not allowed to give classes. So it was like the relationship was a little on-off like that. But the following year, I was with Prabhupada here in Mayapur, and I think just on Gaurpurnima Day, then his old friend B.R. Sridhar Maharaj, he came over from Navadvip. Prabhupada sent his car, and they picked him up and brought him over. He spent 2 or 3 hours with Srila Prabhupada. When he arrived, they immediately sat down in Prabhupada's room and started talking. They took prasadam, they had a little rest, and then they had about an hour or two chit-chatting and sharing whatever it was that they were sharing. Now, I was kind of used to sitting in on any meetings that Prabhupada had with anybody, whether it was a GBC or an outside person or a sannyasi or temple president or whatever it was. But one of the first instructions that I got from Prabhupada when I joined his party in 1975 was up on the roof of his quarters in Vrindavan. He'd gone to take rest there after lunch, and he went into that room there that's at the top. And as he walked in, he turned around, he told me, now your only business is to be with me 24 hours. So I thought, I was ecstatic, of course. And I thought, great, what an instruction. Now I have to be with Prabhupada 24 hours. So as much as possible, I tried to make sure whenever anything was going on in Prabhupada's room, whatever Prabhupada was doing, that I would be there, because Prabhupada told me that's my service. So when Sridhar Maharaj came in March of 76, of course, he and Prabhupada sat down immediately together and began to talk and discuss. that was one time when I felt that it was an intrusion on my part if I went in whilst they were talking together, because they were so learned, so, long-standing, exalted devotees. I thought, I have no business, it would be an intrusion if I went inside. But I wanted to know what they'd shared. So after a couple of hours, Sridhar Maharaj went back to Navadvip. As soon as he left, I went into Prabhupada's room. I was very eager. And Prabhupada was smiling. I had enjoyed their couple of hours together. And he said, so he has said about this verse, Prachivacheche Jato Nagaradigram Savatra Prachahoy Be Moranam. He said, when we read that verse, we always thought that that was something like a poetic glorification of the holy name. But every town and village, we couldn't imagine, how could that be? Every town and village. Maybe in India it would spread, the chanting. But he said, now you have shown us the true meaning of this verse. You are the one who have fulfilled, the purpose and meaning of this verse. So he was very satisfied, very happy that Prabhupada had that success, and he recognized it. So there were one or two of his godbrothers that did give that recognition. Puri Maharaj was another one. A few of them, they understood what Prabhupada was doing was revolutionary. It was remarkable. It was historic. On the train to Calcutta from Allahabad in 1977, we were in Prabhupada's cabin, myself, Rameshwara Swami at that time, and Prabhupada. And, as the train was an overnight train to Calcutta, so Rameshwara couldn't sleep. He was the visiting GBC secretary for the month of January. So he had come just before we had left Bombay to go up to Allahabad. And for 3 weeks, he was there as Prabhupada's secretary. So Rameshwara's got a very wired-up brain. He's always thinking of something, very dynamic personality. And so whilst he woke up in the middle of the night, Srila Prabhupada was already awake, chanting on his beads. In fact, I don't think he went to sleep. So I went to sleep because I had duties the next morning that I would have to fulfill. And I thought if I don't get enough sleep, then I'll make some mistakes. So I went to sleep for a while. After a while, I woke up, and Prabhupada and Rameshwara were still talking together. And several hours they were talking. And at one point, Prabhupada told us, he said, history will mark this period when the Krishna consciousness movement saved the whole world. I always remember that comment. Prabhupada had on the one hand, Prabhupada sometimes would express astonishment or surprise that his movement had taken off so quickly. Just a few boys in a storefront in New York, and within 10 years, we're all over the planet. So Prabhupada used to express his surprise at that sometimes, how amazing that was. And yet on the other hand, he would make these comments sometimes that, yes, they'll mark how this Krishna consciousness movement has saved the whole world. So anyway, Prabhupada had a very broad vision and capacity, tremendous capacity to engage not just himself, but anyone and everyone in the Krishna consciousness movement. And he would push and push and push. He would give us things to do that we couldn't possibly do. But at the time, it seemed like, Prabhupada said something, go do something, open a center here, print these books, distribute prasadam. Prabhupada would say it and we'd do it. There was no question of thinking about it. We'd just go out and we'd do it. And it seemed easy almost. And now when I look back and I see if I had to do the same things again, there's no question, there's no way I would be able to do it. out on the street selling back to Godheads and, Bhagavad Gitas, distributing prasadam, going to cities on your own. I remember going to Perth in 1973, I think it was, myself and Dwaipayana and Korma. And let's see, Korma got, what's that disease that makes you go yellow? Jaundice. He got jaundice, so I had to send him back to Melbourne. And for a couple of weeks whilst I was waiting for Dwaipayana to come, he was going to be a helper, then I was there on my own. So I'd go out every day and sell incense and books. And for 2 weeks I was by myself. But I did it, and I was, we did it because we knew Prabhupada was pleased by that. And many devotees, just like Bali Mahadan, I was just talking about him the other day. He was one of the leaders, big leaders at the early days of the movement. So he had heard that Prabhupada wanted a temple to be opened in Australia. So he immediately left. I'm not sure whether he was in the middle, Southeast Asia at that time, but he came to Australia. He had no money, he had no contacts, he had nowhere to stay, and he ended up living in a squat. Squats are the old derelict houses, sometimes hippies and sometimes alcoholics. They go there and, do whatever they do, get intoxicated. And he had to live in the middle of all of that. But he went on his own to this foreign country with nothing. Upendra came 2 weeks later, and that was the beginning of Krishna consciousness in Australia. So you'll see that pattern was repeated again and again, practically all over the world. Devotees would just, get like a bag full of incense. They had no money, no means, no association. They'd just go out there, and somehow or another, Krishna would send people to them. Prabhupada said later on, he said that these people, they've been planted there by Krishna in readiness for the Krishna consciousness movement. When they hear the holy names, it will reawaken them, and they'll become devotees. And that was what was happening. People were joining right, left and center, just because they heard the kartals or mridanga. In Sydney, as I say, when I joined, I think mid-February, there was probably about, 10 or 12 of us in the whole yatra. And then maybe about 6 or 7 in Melbourne. And that was the whole yatra at that time. So 10 or 12 in Sydney, that was in mid-February. Srila Prabhupada came to Sydney on April the 1st. So within 6 weeks of my joining, I got to see Srila Prabhupada in person. And the occupancy rate of the Sydney temple, we as I say, there was about 10 or 12 of us. By the time Prabhupada came 6 weeks later, there was about 45 devotees. And it was amazing. We'd go out on Sankirtan. We'd chant 4, 5, 6 hours a day, right? We'd have breakfast. We had this double-decker bus, which actually was purchased with the money that I gave the temple from what I'd saved up from working in the mines. So I had all that $1,500 that I'd saved up. It was the first time in my whole life I'd ever had any money. And we used to, we bought this bus, double-decker bus. Bhai Babi painted it up, Hare Krishna movement, the positive alternative. They sold they sent some photographs to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was, oh yes, very good, the positive alternative, that is Krishna. So he was very happy with that. And we go out in the mornings, a couple of hours, we drive around Sydney, drop off devotees on street corner. come back a couple of hours later, get on the bus, go back to the temple, have some prasadam, and again in the afternoon we go out as well. So we were working very hard. Is this still? All right. Is it coming on? Anyway, so we were running here and there like madmen, trying to chant and distribute Prabhupada's, books and magazines. So it was, an amazing period of time. Things happened while we did things that we never knew we could do because Prabhupada asked us. Yeah, if you look back and see, I've just been reading about 26 Second Avenue and how those boys there joined. They just walk in and, or like if you look at San Francisco, Mukunda Maharaj went over there. He just told his friends about Srila Prabhupada. First week of January, 67. Prabhupada turns up. He'd never met most of the people, but there's like 100 people at the airport waiting to greet him. Yeah, if you see that little film clip, Allen Ginsberg is there playing, and Shama Sundar's there with his, mop of curly hair. I mean, these are people that they met Prabhupada once and gave up their entire lives to be with him. It's remarkable when you think about it, how that was done. And everything seemed to go so easily. On the one hand, we were working hard, but it was like magic. Whatever we wanted to do, it would happen. We just had to follow Prabhupada's instructions. So in those days, I don't know, nowadays, we've got this huge organization, highly trained individuals, people from all walks of life. But when we joined the temple, we were actually hippies. At least I was. More or less. We didn't know anything. We were very young. I was 21 when I joined. Our temple president was Mohanananda, 19 years old. He had been sent by Prabhupada or somebody in America to come to Australia because the Australian yatra was struggling a bit. So he was sent to help boost things up. He was a talker. He was fired up. He could motivate people. He had they say that he had practically photographic memory. The whole Sri Ishopanishad, he had learnt that. He could recite the whole thing. And very, very active, always thinking of what could be done. Red hair, so you can imagine. The dynamo. And similarly, so many other devotees. At 19 years old, what do you know? What can you do? But Prabhupada sent us out. He never took any consideration, any material consideration. No, you're a bit young, you wait. As soon as anybody showed any interest, he already had it figured out what the person should do and where he should go. He had it figured out what temples he wanted to be opened. So Prabhupada, he had this, it was like an almost unlimited capacity, not just to do things himself, but to get other people to do it. And no matter how many people joined the movement, he always had room for more and more and more. Always. Yeah, as soon as somebody joined, immediately Prabhupada could engage them. So they were very ecstatic days. Yeah. And at the same time, although Prabhupada had this tremendous energy, he was completely without any passion. Yeah, calm, cool, gentle, humorous. He had all these wonderful attributes. And people would appreciate him for the qualities of his dealings, being, the way that he dealt with us all. So we're very fortunate. I don't know, somehow or another, how we've all gotten this opportunity to be part of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. Prabhupada was the vanguard. The vanguard means the one, like in the days of hand-to-hand war combat. Yeah, they would attack a fort or a town or something. And the vanguard was the few guys at the very front. Yeah, and they would go there. They're the ones that used to get shot. And then all the rest of the army would come in afterwards. So Prabhupada was in the vanguard of Lord Chaitanya's movement. Yeah, he come especially to establish that. And he said, I want that benediction that like Arjuna, I can spend my last breath fighting for Krishna. He told us that when we were in New York. This was exactly 10 years after he had started ISKCON in New York. We just had, they just bought that West 55th Street building. We just had the biggest Rath Yatra to date in New York. Well, it was the first Rath Yatra in New York in '76. Prabhupada got very sick, as he always did when he gave initiations. I think he initiated about 200 devotees there in New York. And the next day he got very, very sick. And he was sick all the way through we flew from New York to London. And Prabhupada had to spend the first 3 or 4 days in bed. George Harrison came to see him. But before he left New York, the GBC, they came to see him and asked him, please don't fly yet. You're not well enough. You've got this, he had like flu. So, even the airlines warn you, if you've got a heavy cold or flu, don't fly because you get bunged up, with disease. And so Prabhupada heard their submission and he said, oh, well, that's nice. He said, but then they may have made some programs for me, so I shouldn't disappoint them. So we flew there. He was sick all the way from New York to London, lying down. When we got there, he could hardly walk. He asked us to get him a wheelchair. Gurudas was there. He was a sannyasi at that time. He ran off to try and get the wheelchair. And in the meantime, Prabhupada suddenly decided that he wasn't going to wait. So he'd been sitting down, all the passengers had got off. And then Prabhupada just suddenly stood up and started walking. So after about 200-300 meters, then Gurudas came running down the corridor. If you've been to London Heathrow, the corridors are very long, they're like endless. So he came running up to us and he said, Prabhupada, I've got a wheelchair for you. So Prabhupada was okay. But the airline insisted that he had to go back to the aeroplane and get on the wheelchair and then come back again to the immigration. Prabhupada didn't say anything, he just shook his head and kept on walking. But he was walking, but he was actually swaying from side to side. He was so sick. And going to the temple, when we came out from the immigration, actually there was a funny incident. Remind me to tell you about the immigration officer. But when Prabhupada came through immigration, there was like hundreds of devotees, but we said, no, we're going straight to the temple, so we avoided that. But when we went to the temple, then Prabhupada, after, in those days there was no M25, it was a rather difficult route from Heathrow. And I was in the back of the car with Prabhupada. I think Hari Kesh was in the front. And I suddenly turned around and I saw Prabhupada sitting there, and he was like this. His hand was in this rolling motion, and he was gagging. He was sick. So we had to stop. Then Prabhupada vomited out the side of the car. We got back in. We carried on. After half an hour, again we had to stop. And then when we got to London, then Prabhupada went straight up to his rooms. And like I say, for about 3 days, he was in bed. But still he was meeting people. George Harrison came and a few other people. So, yes, so anyway, one, just as a side incident, when we had walked down through the corridors of Heathrow, and we came to the immigration, customs and immigration. The airlines having been tipped off that there was a possibility of some problem. So although they wouldn't give us the wheelchair, they put 2 policemen, and they were following at a respectable distance, like 20 yards or 30 yards, just in case anything went wrong. So we got to the immigration counter, and fortunately there was a seat there. Normally in those places they don't have seats. So there was a chair, so the policeman asked Prabhupada to sit in the seat. I went up to the immigration counter with Prabhupada's passport. I was British, so I didn't need one. So I pulled Prabhupada's passport out. It was about this thick. So he had used it so many times that it got fully stamped up. And then the embassy, they got another passport section, pages, and what do you call it? The staples, and stapled them together. So that 3 times. So his passport was about this thick. So when I went up to the counter, I just to save time, I put my finger in where the visa was, British visa. And I gave the passport to, he was a young guy, maybe about the same age as myself, like 25, 26. And I said, this is his passport, and this is where the visa is. He was very arrogant. He didn't like being told, where the visa was. He had to find it himself. So he took the passport, and at the other end from where the visa was, he deliberately put it down on 1 page at a time. He was opening the passport, look this way and that way. So I got so frustrated, I snatched the passport back off him. And I opened it up immediately to where the visa was. I said, here, it's right here. And he got really angry. And he picked the passport up, he pushed it in my face. He said, why don't you stamp it then? Go on, stamp it, stamp it. So I was like flabbergasted. But I turned and looked over, and the 2 policemen were there, and they were looking at this guy. Don't cause any problems, put him straight through. So after his little petulant fit, then he put the passport down, he got the rubber stamp out, stamps Prabhupada's passport, hands the passport back to me, and then he said, here, isn't he the bloke that wrote the Bhagavad Gita? I was astonished. There's this apparent demon, young guy, right? And after, this display that he put on, he gives me the visa back, and then asks, isn't he the man that wrote the Bhagavad Gita? I was shocked that he even heard of the Bhagavad Gita. I figured he must have met the devotees on the street in Oxford Street or someplace and purchased a Gita. And not only that, we're at the airport, and he recognized Prabhupada in person, from the Gita that he had previously purchased. So anyway, we had some fun sometimes, but sometimes it wasn't fun. But the point that I'm making here is that Prabhupada was unlimitedly merciful. He was unlimitedly active in Lord Chaitanya's service, and he was unstoppable. There was nothing that could stop Prabhupada from preaching. Same here when we came to Mayapur in 1977. One gentleman came from Mahesh Pandit's Samadhi. It's about 50 miles from here. And it was just some householder Brahmana. But he was managing this small, not a house, it was more like a hut. But anyway, they had this small temple and the Samadhi of Mahesh Pandit. So he's an important figure in Lord Chaitanya's Leelas. He's mentioned there on one of the branches of the tree of Lord Chaitanya. So this man asked Srila Prabhupada, please come and have a program at my temple. So Prabhupada by that time was extremely ill, very, very ill, and he really couldn't go anywhere. So as soon as this man came, he spoke in Bengali, and then he was all happy, he went off. I understood that he had invited Prabhupada to come for this program, and I was thinking, no way that Prabhupada should be doing this. He's so sick. Yes, right, as soon as we got to Mayapur. And the program was going to be in a few days' time. So I asked Prabhupada, I said, Prabhupada, why don't you we have so many sannyasis, Bhavananda, Jayapataka, a few others. Why can't they go and do the program? You don't have to go. He said, no, I have to go. He asked me and I told him I'd go, so I'm going. So I was in a bit of Maya actually. I came after lunch and my mind was really disturbed that Prabhupada was going on this program. So I pleaded with him, Prabhupada, it doesn't have to be you that can go. So Prabhupada stopped me, he said, like Pradyumna. Yeah, he got it, Pradyumna, Krishna's Pradyumna. Yeah, yes, he got in a fight. So he was knocked off his chariot, unconscious. So then, what did he say? So then his driver took him away. But then as soon as he became conscious again, he immediately ordered his driver, go back. So he said like that. He said, we have to fight for Krishna. So Prabhupada went there. He did the program. He was so weak. When we got there, there was this samadhi. It was a small place. And then just nearby there was a big open area, maybe like half an acre of land or something, just grass. And there was a stage at one end. And Prabhupada was going to speak from this stage. So all the local people were invited to come. Tamal Krishna was there as secretary. Jayapataka Maharaj came. And there was like a wooden steps leading up to the stage. And I think there was maybe about 5 or 6 steps. So we'd had an incident a couple of weeks before in Puri, where Srila Prabhupada had dropped to the ground, trying to stand up and, lost his strength. So I thought, I'll make sure that never happens again. It was I should have been more attentive. So when we went to Mahesh Pandit's place, then Prabhupada started going up the steps. So as he went up one step, I came up behind him on the step behind, and I had my hands out, just in case. We just got to the top, and as we got to the top, Prabhupada was pushing with his cane to get himself up, and just as he got to the top step, his legs went. But I was right behind him, so I held him and put him on the stage. He didn't say anything. He just walked over to the Vyasa, sat down, and then he told Tamal Krishna Maharaj, you give a class, give a lecture. And he told Jayapataka Maharaj, you translate into Bengali. So he had his 2 leading sannyasis, and he's sitting on the Vyasa. And when they finished, it was only like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, but when they finished, Prabhupada sat straight up. He was clapping like anything. That was the first time I'd seen Prabhupada clap. Some people say that Vaishnavas don't clap. I don't know where that comes from. Prabhupada certainly did. So it turned out to be a very nice program. But that was Prabhupada. He was so determined, so energetic. Just recently I found a transcription of a conversation, a short conversation. I think I got it from Gargamuni actually, of Prabhupada talking with a devotee called Bhagatji. Now in the early days of the Krishna Balaram Mandir, This man, his name was Vishvambhar Dayal. So he lived immediately around the corner from Krishna Balaram Mandir. I mean, like 100 yards, that was it. So as soon as he met Prabhupada and he met the devotees, that was it, he was surrendered. And what was I going to say? Sorry, my brain's gone blank. What was I saying? Bagaji. Before that. No, it's something to do with Prabhupada. No, don't guess. No. I know I've forgotten what I was going to say.
He came to see Prabhupada.
Oh, right, okay. So he came to see Prabhupada in his rooms. This was in July of 77. So the temple had been open a couple of years by that time. So there was a short conversation. I'd never seen it before because it was in Hindi. And for a long time, the archives would not transcribe Hindi or Bengali conversations. They didn't have the money, they didn't have the manpower. So what they would do is put the name of the person who was speaking. And then after that, they just put in brackets Hindi or, Bengali. So this little conversation was in Hindi. And Prabhupada was telling Bagaji, he said, I've been sick since 1965. Think about it. 65. The year that he set off to begin his work was the sickest he's ever been in his life. He said, and once I got sick, I never recovered. He said, I was always sick. So I had 2 heart attacks on the boat. Then he gets to America. He said, I was always sick, all the way through. So that 10 years, which was at the peak of his preaching, his activity, flying around the world so many times, opening 108 temples, starting the BBT, translating his books throughout the night, very often without sleeping at all. And he was sick the whole time. Once or twice there were some incidences, like in Hawaii. We'd gone there for May of 1976. After 2 or 3 days, and Prabhupada, one evening he rang the bell, and we went in, myself and Pushta Krishna. He was the secretary at that time. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and Prabhupada was just sitting there. He said, I won't go on my morning walk tomorrow morning. He said, I'm not feeling well. So after having called us in at 1 o'clock in the morning to say that he wasn't going to go on his morning walk, he then sat us down and preached to us from the verses that he was translating at that moment for about an hour. Because once Prabhupada started talking, he couldn't stop. Whenever he was talking about Krishna, that was it. He would just get swept away with the whole thing. So 2 or 3 times, a few days later, he had come to the end of the 7th canto, and he mentions that in the book, that we're in the Panchatattva temple in Hawaii, and we're praying for the blessings of Lord Chaitanya. We're finishing this 7th canto. So he didn't take any rest. I went in at 9 o'clock at night to give him his evening massage. Prabhupada said no. He was already working. And he worked all through the night, literally, not a minute's sleep, just working on his books. So even all the activity and effort that Prabhupada put in externally to ISKCON, to building up ISKCON, internally what was going on, he's translating these books, 60, 70 volumes of books. There was some professor from Toronto, 3 professors came to see Prabhupada in Toronto. So the Caitanya-charitamrita had just come out about a year before, the whole set. and 17 volumes. So while they're talking, this professor, she was looking at the books. She said, how do you manage to write so many books? Everybody knows, I mean, to write even one book, or one newspaper man, he asked also the same question in New York. How do you find the time to write these books? He said, just to write 5 or 6 books in a life would be anybody's lifetime. And you've got, 7, 20, whatever, by that time, 50 books. He was astonished. So anyway, this lady professor asked in Toronto, where do you find the time to do all this writing? And you've got your society and everything. So Prabhupada said, well, he said, I go to bed at 10:30. I get up at 11:30. I chant the balance of my rounds, if there is any. And then I write. So he said, like this, throughout the night, I'm writing. Little drops of water wear away the stone. So in this way, we have written 70 volumes of books. There's a funny story, actually. When the books were all printed and the whole Caitanya-charitamrita was complete, then Prabhupada formed this, what we call the library party. And the library party was headed up by Sauri Maharaj. So they were touring all the universities and all the libraries, and they were selling standing orders of Prabhupada's books. So standing order, it means whatever books are available now you take and you pay. And what you do is you pay for the whole set, but let's say there's only 10 out of 17. So you pay for the 10, the other 7, as they come out, automatically you buy them. Yeah, so they had a system that the university librarians, they would buy books that were recommended by the professors. So our men, they would go and see different professors first, and they would show them the books, and then they would tell them you can have a free one if you write a requisition. A requisition means that there was a special form to order automatically any new book that came out from that author. And they get the professors to sign the requisition. And then they take that to the librarian. He'd say, oh, such and such a professor has ordered all the books. So immediately he would make the standing order. So that way they were very successful. Prabhupada was very, very pleased with them. And then one time they went to, I think, Chicago. And there's this Professor Dimmock, who, if you've ever seen the very first printing of the Bhagavad Gita, the Macmillan or Penguin, the Penguin one, the purple one with the black silhouette. So in there's an introduction or a foreword by this Edward Dimmock, and he was considered to be the foremost professor. His specialty was Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So he was considered to be the foremost scholar in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and he was working on what would be his, what they call it, magnum opus, the main work of his whole life. So he was translating Caitanya-charitamrita into English, and it was going to be the first time it had ever been done. And somehow or another he was going on, but that was just translating the verses, not anything to do with any commentary or anything like that. So anyway, the devotees, the library party, they went to see him because he had this foreword in Prabhupada's original Gita. They thought he'd be friendly. And they said when they brought the Chaitanya-charitamrita out and showed him, he almost had a heart attack. Because this man had been working for years to get this, to translate. And not only had he translated it, transliterated it, put the word-for-word equivalents, etc. He had written, not just the verse, but then he had, given a commentary on the verse. it just blew him away. And I was told that it practically shattered him after that. Yeah, he became so, I don't know, envious or disappointed. Prabhupada told those professors in Toronto, he said, it took, they asked him, how long did it take to do the whole thing? He said, 18 months. So in 18 months, Prabhupada produced a 17-volume series. Confirmed. How long does this go on for? What was it? What was it? Okay. Dimmock.
The mosque is just down the street.
The mosque. Yeah. Do they chant it in Bengali?
I don't know.
Who lives here? Are they chanting in Bengali or in Arabic? Arabic. I think so.
The mosque is just down the street.
Yeah. Do they do it at morning time also?
Oh yeah.
5 times.
That was the first time. Now he's going a little longer than he normally goes. He's going a little longer than he normally goes. It's usually like a minute.
Few minutes. We might be here all day. Okay, continue on. So yeah, Professor Dimmock, he got the shock of his life. Actually, the man was a drunkard. No, it's fact. Wasn't no exaggeration. So he was a drunkard, but he was a scholar. So when, the first incidents with him was that when they got the Gita ready, and the publishers approached Dimmock to write a foreword, he didn't really want to do it. So what they did was that they somehow or another figured out whenever he was sober and whenever he was intoxicated, and when he was under the influence, our men had already written up a very nice introduction. So they gave that to Dimmock, and he signed it without reading it, and then it was printed. Afterwards, they said he was really angry, but it was too late. Then he made them promise to take it out from the future editions, which we did. But anyway, the point is that Dimmock, took years and years to do 2 or 3 volumes. Prabhupada pops up, starts a worldwide movement, still translating the Bhagavatam. And then in 18 months, he translates the whole Caitanya-charitamrita, not just translation and, but also these beautiful paintings, scores of paintings, and it was fabulous. And they couldn't believe it. Dimmock couldn't believe it. The professor in Toronto couldn't believe it. Nobody could believe it. It was a phenomenal thing. So that was Prabhupada. He told actually George Harrison in '76 in their last meeting. Prabhupada was in bed because he was very sick. He had George brought into his bedroom and they put down a chonky and they cooked a big feast. So they served George the feast whilst he was sitting on the carpet in Prabhupada's bedroom. And Prabhupada was sitting up in bed and chit-chatting with him. So, what was I going to say? Again, this exclamation from George, I don't know how he does it. Prabhupada gave him one of the new copies of the 7th canto. And when George saw it, he said, well, I'm not much of a reader, I like chanting. But he said, I don't know how he does it. How is it possible? And Prabhupada said, yes, it is not humanly possible. He's talking about his own writing. He said, it is not humanly possible. He said, I do it because I don't sleep. And then George knew a lot of philosophy. And he said, yes, he said they call sleep the little death. The little death. And Prabhupada said, yes. He said, I don't like to sleep. So that was Prabhupada. If you told him you wanted to do something and you didn't have enough time, he would immediately say, all right, then sleep less. That was his philosophy. Every second of every minute of every day should be utilized in Krishna's service. And, what to speak about at this period in history. Yeah. Prabhupada said the golden age of Kali Yuga, began with Lord Chaitanya's appearance 500 years ago. So we're at the very beginning of it. We have such an incredible opportunity of being connected with Prabhupada, with Bhaktisiddhanta, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the 6 Goswamis. Everything is there. Every opportunity is there. All we have to do is just join in. That's all. Prabhupada did all the work for us, and all we have to do is just expand whatever Prabhupada did himself. So in that short period of 10 or 11 years, what Prabhupada did will never be repeated. That's my conviction, at least. Nobody can do what Prabhupada did. He made it, when we were with him, it seemed, everything happened. Whatever he wanted to do, it was like a kalpavriksha. You just wished for something to happen, and it happened. You worked, like, when they did the Caitanya-charitamrita in LA, they moved the BBT from New York to LA. The first thing that they did, Prabhupada told them, because there was 17 volumes of books that were waiting, for layout and what?
It was in manuscript form.
Yes, in manuscript form. So Prabhupada gave them 2 months to complete all 17 volumes. They said, it's not possible. It's impossible. Prabhupada said, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. So by the end, Rameshwar and Radhaballabha, they were on a morning walk when Prabhupada said that to them. They left the morning walk, they rushed back to the temple, they called all the devotees from every department of the BBT and told them, Prabhupada said everything has to be published within 2 months. Everybody was aghast. But at the same time, they organized, just like when I was a young man, I left school, I went to work in a steel factory. So you had to work 24 hours a day. 3 shifts of 8 hours a day. From 6 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, 2 in the afternoon till 10 at night, 10 at night till 6 in the morning. That's how we were working. So in the same way, they reorganized the way the BBT worked. They got all the devotees in like a shift system. And, you do your work, knock off for 10 minutes, have something to eat, maybe get a little sleep, and then come back and continue on. And they did it. Within 2 months, 17 volumes of books published. Prabhupada said, very good, now let's get on with the Bhagavatam. So we can't conceive of who Prabhupada is. We can't conceive of what was going on inside. We only know Prabhupada from what was going on outside. Yeah, the outer manifestation of his preaching work. We don't know what was going on inside, what was motivating him. The Prabhupada was getting instruction. He did say that. Myself and Harikesh were in his room in early September 1976 in Vrindavan. And we were reading from that verse, the qualities of a sadhu. Anybody know that Sanskrit? Gives it lists the qualities of a sadhu. It's in the third canto. I always forget this one. Anyway, it's in the third canto. Titikshava Karunika Suridam Sava Bhutanam, something like that. So we were reading that. It was just myself and Harikesh and Prabhupada. It was after breakfast. And Prabhupada had Harikesh read out the verse. And then Prabhupada was listening. It's like pure nectar going into his ears. And he said, there's no literature like the Bhagavatam. He said, till date, nobody can write like the Bhagavatam. And so Harikesh said, well, I think that there's only one person that's following this, meaning all those nice qualities, but none of us could follow that. But Prabhupada was following. So Prabhupada was very humble. He said, no. He said, I say about the Bhagavatam, it's so sweet. He said, I say it is my writing, but I know it is not my writing. It is Krishna's writing. Yeah. So I know it is not my writing, it is Krishna's writing. Therefore, we should always read the Bhagavatam. So anyway, are we due to, do we do more or less? Or? Well, what time are you serving out?
20 minutes, but I can chant.
Okay, do a couple of questions first, if anybody asks. All right, Agnidev has a question. We'll do a few questions, and then Prabhu will chant for a few minutes, and then we'll have the feast. Is it working? Hare Krishna. I can't hear you. Yeah.
So my question for you is, it's touching my lips. Can you tell us what was it like to be Prabhupada, to be with Prabhupada, someone like Prabhupada, to be with Prabhupada 24 hours? Like he said, he asked you, he told you your service was to be with him all the time.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know, how was that? What was your experience being with him, around him all the time?
Mm.
To everyone, it may seem like it was, we don't know, so we think you're lucky, it must have been a lot of nectar, but I think that it must have been difficult.
Yeah, very.
So I want
Did everybody hear the comment? Yes. Yeah, I was very much aware of the fact that some previous secretaries or servants had difficulties after being on Prabhupada's party, because after a while familiarity breeds contempt and you get slack and then you start making mistakes. So that had happened to various devotees. So one of the things that I was determined not to do was to get in a position where I got too familiar with Srila Prabhupada or inattentive. So it required, for Prabhupada, there was a natural state of Krishna consciousness that he was always in. There wasn't like an effort to become Krishna conscious. He is, the living Bhagavatam. He was the personified Bhagavatam. Whatever was in Prabhupada's books, he naturally fit that description. So to be with him 24 hours a day, there was definitely a shift in consciousness that I had, which just somehow or another opened up or expanded my consciousness so that I could keep up with the level of consciousness that Prabhupada was on. I don't know whether I'm properly describing it, but that's what it was like. It was like when I first joined the temple, you left everything behind you. You walked away from all your money, your clothing, everything. And we joined the temple and, tried to become devotees. But, what was I going to say? There was, it was a drastic change in consciousness from being a non-devotee to being a devotee. It was a shock, cultural shock, intellectual shock. It was a complete, I'm sure everybody had the same experience. At least I did. I had what they call an epiphany. There was a certain moment where everything suddenly made sense. Everything that Prabhupada was saying made sense. So what I experienced when I went from being just like one of the regular devotees to becoming Prabhupada's servant and being with him all the time was like another similar shift. I had to step it up in order to be able to stay with Prabhupada. And I did it as long as I could. I ended up, by the beginning of 1977, I'd been with Prabhupada for about 15 months. And I started to make small mistakes. Like I forgot to put the towel in his bathroom. He went to the bathroom, washed his hands, no towel. He came out on the balcony, I was standing there, so he told me there's no towel. So he said, it's not a big thing, but if you don't do it, then I am disturbed. So there were one or two incidences like that. That story about Pradyumna and going to Mahesh Pandit's, I had objected in the afternoon to Srila Prabhupada that he shouldn't go because he was too sick. And Prabhupada said, no, it's all right. And he told me the story about Pradyumna. But I still wasn't happy with that. And so I tried to protest. As soon as I did that, Prabhupada lifted his finger like this. He looked very sternly. I was sitting on the floor. I knew I'd gone too far. So there was one or two occasions where I started making mistakes or being inattentive. And internally also, I started getting some intimations that this was the end of my duration as Prabhupada's personal secretary or servant, and somebody else was going to come along. So internally and externally, I got to the limit of what I could do, being that close up with Prabhupada all the time. So, yeah, it was difficult, definitely difficult. But by Prabhupada's grace, we got the chance. Any other question?
Prabhu, I listened so many stories as Prabhupada disciples. After Prabhupada departure, some dream, something like that, but it's coming true. I had some story when I was in London, and I cannot distribution more books. My spiritual master told me, you distribution 50 books, but I cannot distribution too much. But I had my first experience because I for 3 days, 4 days, I only distribution 10 books. But my Guru Maharaj told me you distribution every day 50 books. You know? And I come in very scared and very like sad because I don't follow the order of my spiritual master. And then I go to Prabhupada, the Prabhupada Murti there, but I know things is Murti and that, but I speak to him like that. Please, Prabhupada, help me. I want to distribution the books here, but in 10 days I distribution like few books. And my Guru Maharaj told me you distribution every day 50 books means I can achieve. I said, Prabhupada, please. I don't know how it's coming to me like that, but this day in the night or in the morning, I drink with Prabhupada. Means very clear when I don't know. I have sometimes this experience when I have some problem in my spiritual life. I go to Prabhupada, but I don't consider Prabhupada like Murti, you know, in the temple like that. I consider he is present like that. I also listen so many stories, so many devotees. I want to know to you after Prabhupada left to go to spiritual world. You have some experience, some dream to you, and say you want to do like that or no. This only I want to know about this personal experience. I don't know. I'm sorry. It's just very problem to you.
Devotees always
I'm
want to
sorry.
know whether you've had a dream. Yeah, dreams are not important. Yeah, if Prabhupada comes to you in a dream, you're very fortunate. Yeah, but it shouldn't affect your activity in Krishna consciousness. It may be, there, it may be not. It's all on the mental platform, dreams. I was just reading the verse in the Bhagavatam today, actually, about how dreams and the mental platform, what role it plays in our embodiment in material nature. But anyway, what if you never had a dream in your whole life about Prabhupada or Krishna? It doesn't mean that you're not a devotee. It doesn't mean that you're not advanced. Yeah, that's between you and Krishna. But personally, I don't dream about Prabhupada very much. Maybe once every few years. But I don't find any difficulty in that. And Prabhupada told us it's not good to put any emphasis on dreams. Yeah, they could be anything. Main thing is go on with your service, do what you're instructed by your spiritual leaders, your guru, temple president, and whatever, and just do your best. Krishna will help you. There are occasions, I'm sure every devotee's had, where you can feel very definitely Krishna or Prabhupada working through you. Sometimes in certain circumstances, it happens. So that's nice. Prabhupada said that's good, that's fortunate. But go on with your service. So don't worry, dreaming or not dreaming. Most of the time nowadays, I feel like I'm in a permanent fog. Not a dream. My brain doesn't work properly anymore. I keep forgetting things all the time. But you go on, you do what you can. That pleases Krishna and Prabhupada, and you get enlightened. What more do you want? Any other question? No. So I'm going to finish at this point. Agnidev Prabhu is going to chant.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranams. Accept my obeisances. I have one more question.
Okay.
What of all the experience with Srila Prabhupada, what is like the biggest instruction that you feel you received from him?
Same as he gave to everybody. chant your rounds, do service, preach as much as possible. Actually, when I left Prabhupada's service, I went back to Australia at the beginning of 77. Then at the end of 77, I came back onto the party for 1 month as a visiting GBC. That was at the end of September 77. And I stayed for 1 month. We brought Prabhupada from Bombay back to Vrindavan. So I stayed for 1 month. And because I was a new GBC, I had lots of work in Australia to do. I got Prabhupada's approval, to work there rather than come back onto his personal party, which is something that I desired. But now I was out preaching and Prabhupada said, I want you there for now. Later on we'll see about coming back. So the night that I left Prabhupada physically for the last time, I went into his bedroom with Tamal Krishna Maharaj. I told him that now I have to go back to Australia. I've got so many things that I have to do. So Prabhupada was lying very quietly on his back. As I said that, he put his hand up like a blessing, and he said, wherever you remain, chant Hare Krishna. And that was it. That was the last thing he ever said to me. Wherever you remain, chant Hare Krishna. So the circumstances of my being in Vrindavan or Australia were not important. What was important was that we keep chanting. Keep chanting, you'll go. Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Haribol, Haribol.
Do you need that?
This one question. Sauri Prabhu. Prabhu has a question. He's asking, what's the role of the woman in our society?
One more. What's
The role of the role of women in our society is the same as the role of the men. Get out and preach. Chant Hare Krishna. The holy name is not governed by any set of material, circumstantial situation or intellect, etc. You just chant Hare Krishna. It doesn't matter what your body's doing or not doing. Hare Krishna mantra, Golokera Pramadana. Harinama Sankirtana. The holy name comes directly from the spiritual world. Anybody who takes up the chanting of the holy name is more advanced than any man, woman, cow, dog, or anything else. Yeah, you just keep on chanting and you'll see. The role is the same. Krishna's looking for devotion. He's not looking for how many, how much money we've earned or whatever. He's looking to see what devotion we've developed. And that opportunity to develop real Krishna consciousness was not given just to men. It was given to everybody, women, kids, everybody. So that's all we need to know. All the rest is circumstantial. That's why Varnashram is not part of our movement. It can be, we can utilize it in Krishna's service, but being in Varnashram, if there's no chanting, then it's useless. Yeah. So the main thing is, as long as a person's chanting, whatever their body is, it doesn't matter. That body's going to fall very shortly. We've already started experiencing now, not one, not two, but multiple departures of Prabhupada's disciples. So the time is coming on us. So we have a little time. We should utilize that for chanting as much as possible. Anyone and everyone should do it. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Nityalila Pravishnuam Vishnupad Paramhansa Parivrajagacharya Sudarasada Sishriman, His Divine Grace, O Boy Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki, Nityalila Pravishnuam Vishnupad Paramhansa Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki, Nāma-haṭṭa Srila Haridas Thakur Ki, Prem se Guru Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki, Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki, Sri Vrindavan Dhama Ki, Sri Mayapur Dhama Ki, Sri Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki, Ganga Devi Jamuna Mai Ki, Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani Ki, Nāma Sankirtana Ki, Harinam Mahamantra Ki, Brihat Mridanga Seva Ki, Paramakaruna Sri Gaur Nityananda Ki, Shambhida Bhakta Vrinda Ki. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, next on the program is Bhagavad Prasadam.
Yato yato yami tato nishima Mahine singhari daye nishimha Nasimha maden taranam kapade Dhanada